All right, today we're going to begin looking at section 16, which is Jesus in Nazareth, which covers Matthew 2, 19 to 23, and then Luke 2:39. All right, so first of all, number 115. For the third time, an angel communicates to Joseph by what means? Haley.
Herod's death.
You misunderstood the question. By what means is the angel communicating? Jonas.
A dream.
A dream. He uses a dream for the third time. All right, read the questions carefully. Number 116. What three commands are given to him? Didn't we have that question already?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was in the previous section.
In the previous.
All right, so we have it again. Yay, Griff. Give us all three, Griff, since we had it before.
Okay. Rise.
1,
Take the child and his mother.
2,
Go to the land of Israel.
3. All right. Any question? 3 easy points. 4 easy points so far. Number 117. Who had replaced the deceased Herod the Great, and what was his relationship? Okay, first of all, what's the name of the guy that replaced him, Sean?
Archelaus.
Archelaus is usually how I've heard it pronounced. That may not be correct, but Archelaus, and what's his relationship? Noah.
His father was Herod.
All right, so that means Archelaus is his son. Okay, so Archelaus, his son. 2 points, one for each of those items. Any question? Archelaus, his son. All right, speculate. Why might Joseph have intention to return to the area of Jerusalem? Notice that he was planning on going back to the area of Jerusalem, but when he heard that Archelaus was ruling, he decided against it. So why would he have gone there to begin with? Because he wasn't from there. Why do you suppose he would have intended to go back to Jerusalem? Sam, what do you think?
It could have been safer. I don't know.
Safer than?
I don't know.
Yeah, not safer. Not necessarily safer than anywhere else. Why Jerusalem? Marissa, what did you say?
I said because he owns land. Like that's where his family.
Okay, that's where his ancestral family's from, but he personally doesn't have anything there, so that wouldn't be a draw. Noelle, did you have anything different?
No, I just said that's where the family land was.
Okay, that's a good reason, but probably not what would draw him there. I don't think in this case. Kayla, do you have anything different?
No, I haven't talked to him.
Anybody? Anybody else? Joel?
So the prophecies may be fulfilled?
Okay, we can always go back to that things happen because God said that it would happen that way. But what I want us to look at is, from a human perspective, why are people making decisions? Not just that God predetermined them, but why was he thinking about going back to Jerusalem? All right, Brandon, what do you think?
Lots of Jews or Israelites lived there.
Yeah, but lots of them lived up in Nazareth
Because
too.
that's the place where like many of them were, so he would just feel more comfortable and with all those people.
Yeah, I mean, and lots of Jewish people lived in Egypt. So there were lots of Jewish people living in different places. I don't think that would be cause. I mean, probably more, obviously more around Jerusalem. All right, here's what I think. See if any of you agree or if you had it. Jerusalem seemed like the logical place to bring up the future king, because Jerusalem's the capital. Does that make sense? Some of you aren't so sure. Anybody have anything like that? Now that I've said it? Okay, now you're raising your hands. Yes. All right. So that won't count for a point unless you had the same answer I did. I will give you a bonus point for thinking so clearly that would be a logical place to bring up the king. All right, next question. Another speculate question, 119. Why might Joseph have been afraid of this new ruler? All we're told is that when he heard Archelaus was ruling in place of his father Herod the Great, that Joseph decided not to go back to Jerusalem. Why would that be the case? Anybody have a reason? Joel?
Because he was Herod's son and Herod wanted to kill the first one.
Okay, that's true. Maybe go a step beyond that. Because Herod had lots of sons, and presumably one of them would have taken the place of Herod. In fact, before Herod died, he changed his will 6 times as to who would be his successor. So it could have been any one of his many sons. And Joseph presumably would have been okay with some of them, but Archelaus, he was not okay with living under his rule. Anybody have another idea? Why not Archelaus?
Because otherwise it might be as bad as Herod.
Yeah, not only was he his son, he was just like him. Archelaus was just like his dad. Now, sometimes it's good to be like your dad, right? Any of you guys ever told you're like your father? You hope not. How many of you would be glad? No, I guess we'll go there. But Archelaus was just like his dad, and so Joseph didn't think would not be a safe place to be. All right, any question? In fact, I'll tell you, he was so evil a ruler that later the Romans took him away from that rulership and exiled him, actually kicked him out of the empire because he was so bad. And that's when Judea started to be governed by a Roman governor, which eventually would be Pontius Pilate. But Archelaus was an evil man. Any questions? All right, another speculation question. 120. By the way, 119 doesn't look like. Did anybody have because he was like his dad? All right, so if you have, now again the hands are going up. Where are you guys when I'm asking? All right, so give yourself a bonus point for that one.
I have a question. I said that he would want to kill Jesus because just like he was his father.
Yeah. All right, 120. Another speculate. Where did this family go? Why did this family go to live in Nazareth in Galilee? This is a pretty easy speculation question, so should be lots of hands up on this. Nate?
It's told in the dream.
Did they actually say go to Nazareth? No, it just says he was warned in a dream about going back to Judea. It doesn't say that he was actually told to go to Galilee. So, what was the reason he went to Nazareth? Luke?
They were from Nazareth.
That's where they were from. Yeah, Joseph probably had a business there. So, that was his hometown. How many of you had something like that? Okay, we'll give you a bonus point for that. 121, a research question. What prophet predicted that Messiah should be called a Nazarene? What prophet predicted that he would be called a Nazarene? Anybody? Anybody find anything? Brenna?
Isaiah?
No?
I found that it wasn't like one prophet, like one particular verse. It was just more like the prophets in general.
And did any of them say he would be, did any of them specifically say he will be called a Nazarene? No, none of the prophets said that. So what is the significance here? What's Matthew talking about?
Well, when I asked like my dad and stuff, and he was like,
Who's
Isaiah,
the stuff?
oh, about like
Go
this,
ahead.
about this, and he was like, well, he doesn't say specifically, but a lot of the verses in Isaiah refer to Jesus being growing up in that region. So if you,
I'm
I
not
forget
sure.
which verses he pointed out to me.
It says that he'd be a light in that region. I'm not sure that if they say anything about him growing up there.
There was just like verses about him being in that region, so he was like, I guess that's what he's referring to.
Okay, I think there's the explanation that most commentators would give would be a little different than that. What do you know anything about the city of Nazareth? What do people think about Nazareth? Jewish people look down on Nazareth. And so to be called a Nazarene would be like an insult. It would be saying something negative about somebody. Oh, you're a Nazarene. So I know what you're like. And in fact, remember later on, the leadership of the Jews said, Jesus is from Nazareth. Does any, well, in fact, it's Nathaniel says, does any good thing come out of Nazareth? Nothing good comes out of there. It's a hole in the ground. It's an awful place. A lot of Gentiles there. There's an army barracks there, Roman army barracks. It's a nasty place. Nothing good comes out of there. And later on, the leadership of the Jews say that no prophet has ever come out of Nazareth, out of Galilee. So it was looked down upon. Now, the prophets in general, in many places, in Isaiah and other places, do talk about how the Messiah will be looked down upon. That the Messiah will be considered. In fact, Isaiah 53, it talks about how he would be despised and rejected. So that's what Matthew's thinking about, I think. There's controversy about this because it's not so clear. But I think Matthew is thinking about how later Jesus would be despised by his own people. Remember, John said he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. And so, being from Nazareth, that it kind of fits together. So when Matthew says he'll be called a Nazarene, he's not specifically saying that the Old Testament says specifically he'll be called a Nazarene, but that he would be looked down upon like someone from Nazareth. So it's similar to when Matthew quotes from Isaiah and says his name will be called Emmanuel. Well, his name was never called Emmanuel, but it is a description of who he was. And Nazarene, in this case, was a description of somebody from Nazareth who was looked down upon. And in the Old Testament, it didn't use the word Nazarene, but it did say he would be looked down upon. All right, does that make sense? Kind of talked around a lot here to try to get the point, but I think that's what Matthew's getting at. All right, so how many of you said no prophets say this? One person. All right, I will count that as a bonus point too. Many predicted the Messiah would be looked down on, but nobody said this exactly. All right, so we had a lot of bonus points here in section 16. Let's go to section 17. The growth of Jesus, Luke 2:40. In what two ways did Jesus advance? In what two ways did he advance? What do you have, Joel?
Strength and wisdom.
Strength and wisdom. Okay, now I put it in different words. What do you have, Sean?
He grew and became strong, filled with wisdom.
Okay, grew. And grew, you're talking, grew how? Grew in what way? What do you mean he grew?
He aged.
He aged. Okay. There are different ways to grow. So I'm trying to get you to tell me the specific way in which he grew.
I put physically strong.
Physically is what I was going for there. I know you assume that that's what it was, but I want you to understand that he grew physically. And when you're talking about growing in wisdom, what realm would we put that?
Spiritually?
Spiritually. So I think a good way of thinking about this is that Jesus grew physically and spiritually. Now, if you had other words down there that approximate that, in wisdom, he grew, and you meant physically, that's okay. We'll count that for 2 easy points. Any question about your answer? All right. If you don't have the words physically and spiritually down there, write that down to the side, someplace where you have that. If that question comes up, that's all I expect to have as the answer, okay? Physically and spiritually. All right, be creative. Put what is said in Luke 2:40 in a short paragraph describing Jesus at this point in his life. Oh, do we have any creative people here? Nobody wants to admit it, if you want. Who'd be willing to read their paragraph for us? All right, Zach.
Jesus grew up to be a man in God, and Jesus became strong and wise in the Holy Spirit.
Okay. Okay, somebody else? Brennan?
Jesus was a human once. He grew and had to mature as we do. When he was born, he was not one fully developed, but as a baby. Jesus, from a very young age, had the wisdom of the Lord upon him, and understood what it was to be human and what we wanted to be.
Okay, good. Somebody else? Anybody else speculate about what it was like for Jesus growing up? If you had to write a story about Jesus growing up, or when he was a young person, when he was elementary school age, what might you say? Any ideas? Not that you wrote it down, but any ideas right now? What would you say? What could you talk about concerning Jesus as a young boy? What are some things that would have happened to him, or that he would have had to do? Did he lose his baby teeth? Yeah. Did he have to learn how to talk? I mean, he just didn't come out of the womb spouting off in Hebrew, all the scriptures and stuff. No. He had to grow as a human. That's what's so important about this verse. This short verse, it talks about him growing physically. He had to learn these things, and he had to grow. And he got bigger and bigger. He got taller. You know, I can imagine his mother Mary marking off on the doorpost. Oh, Jesus, you're this tall this year. Last year you were down here. You ever think about that? He had to learn how to talk, had to learn how to read. Did he have to memorize scripture? Yeah. He didn't automatically know it. Well, we kind of had this idea that him being God, that he knew everything. But remember, when he took on human flesh, he limited his godness, which we see in Philippians 2 especially. He limited himself so that he was growing up as a human being. He had to learn scripture. So later on, when he is quoting, for example, from Deuteronomy to Satan in the temptation, where did that come from? It came from the fact that he memorized that when he was a young person. He had memorized at least large sections of Deuteronomy, maybe the whole book of Deuteronomy. That was not uncommon. People would memorize whole books of the Bible, the Old Testament. So he grew. Now, he grew in wisdom as well. So he grew spiritually. How does that work with someone who is the Son of God? Brenna?
He was fully God and fully man. So he would, just because he was fully man, which means he would have to grow, and he would, like, as he grew up, he would learn out what it meant to be God.
Yeah, that was something he had to learn. He had to learn wisdom. He had to learn the spiritual aspects of being a man in Israel. Like I said, he limited his godliness so that didn't come through. He had to still grow up as a person. He was a full human being. Now, aside from this, we really don't have any stories or anything about Jesus' youth when he was young. We see this one event that we'll come to here when he was 12, but nothing from before that really, except this right here and his birth, Trapper's birth. All right, any other comments about Jesus' youth? Okay, next we come to section 18, is visit to Jerusalem. This is a very interesting event because we have in the Gospels his birth, and later on, the beginning of his ministry, the baptism, and in between there's this one thing that happened when he was 12 years old, the trip to Jerusalem. So nothing much before 12, and nothing much after until he's in his 30s. So this provides a very interesting event for us to look at. All right, so question number 124, another speculate question. Of what significance is the fact that Jesus was 12 years old? Why does it make it a point that he was 12? How many found an answer to that? All right, Kayla, what did you find?
At this point, every Jewish boy was like made a son of the law, being put under a course of instruction and trained like to fast and attend public worship. And at that point, they learned how to trade, what they're going to do in life.
Okay, good. That's a full explanation. And what what is that? Kayla said that at 12 you became a son of the law. Does anyone know what the term for that is? Anybody? Luke, are you saying it?
It was his coming of age.
Okay, what's that called?
I
What's the Hebrew? How many have heard of a bar mitzvah? How many knew what it meant? Son, bar, or ben or bar, both mean son. Mitzvah this is not the law exactly, but it's a son of the law, of the commandments, and it's the age at which you are considered to have entered into adulthood. You become an adult at 12. How many of you are adults? Some of you are hesitantly raising your hands. How many of you are over 12 years old? That would be everybody. No, you're not sure? So in the Jewish culture, you would be considered adults. In fact, throughout most of history, you would be considered adults. It's only in modern times that we have, the experts have decided that between 12 and 18 or 21 is this time called adolescence, when we don't expect you to act like adults and we have to train you and so on. But throughout most of history, by this time, you'd all be married, you'd have jobs, you'd be supporting maybe the family that's coming along. So it's only in modern history that you're allowed to be as immature as you are. So Jesus was an adult at age 12. Brandon?
Is it okay if I said that he had to go like a human and this was giving a time frame where he's
Giving a
at?
time what?
A time frame of where he's at.
Yeah, that's not really the significance of 12. I mean, that might, if it was any other time, if it was like 11 or 10 or 14, that might be true. But here, the fact that it's 12 is a specific time, and that is he has had his bar mitzvah. This may, in fact, be his first trip to Jerusalem, because until that time, he wasn't required to go. It was only adult males that were required to go to Jerusalem for Passover every year. Marissa?
I thought a bar mitzvah was at age 13.
Ah, good question. Well, she didn't say it as a question, but it is. Today, it's 13. But that was changed. Now I forget. I think it was in the Middle Ages. They changed it from 12 to 13 for boys. And I don't recall why. I used to know. It's somewhere in my file cabinet, in my mind. But I'm not sure if I remember the reason why. But it used to be 12. Now for girls, it still is 12. Girls, it's not bar mitzvah, it's bat, B-A-T-H, bat mitzvah, which is daughter of the law. Joel, do you have information?
Did it have anything to do with the 12 steps that went up to the porch of the temple?
I don't know. Did you find something about that?
Yeah. I found it on this website.
Okay.
It says, the temple in the time of Christ was a magnificent building from the temple court. 12 steps led up to the porch that was as high as the temple itself.
Okay, so either the steps were made that number to reflect the years that a person had to be in order to be an adult and enter the temple. Probably that's the case, because they considered 12 to be an adult. I don't think it was the other way around, that they counted the steps and said, oh, that must be what you have to be to be an adult. All right, so the point that Marissa bringing up is that now it's 13, but it used to be 12. And I'll have to try to find the reason for that for you. I've forgotten. Any other questions? All right, so Jesus is there in Jerusalem, first time as an adult. All right, so number 125. How do you think Jesus' parents felt while they were searching for 3 to 5 days? Can you imagine that? You know, they're a long ways from home, and they're part way home, and they're looking around and say, hey, where's Jesus? Isn't he with you? No, I thought he was with you. Well, maybe he's with his cousins. No, he's not there either. They're looking around, and can't find him. Got to go back to Jerusalem. Have any of you ever been left by your parents in a store or church or someplace? A lot of you. All right, maybe you can identify then, if you saw your parents' reaction, what was the reaction of Mary and Joseph? How did they feel? Who wants to respond to that? Worried? Yeah. Lucas? Luke?
Panic.
Pardon me?
Panic.
Panicked? Yeah. Well, how many of you, when you were left behind, were your parents in a panic trying to find you? A couple of you. Some of them were just, he'll show up when he shows up, right? What else, Brennan?
I had a question about the last one. Was that like 1.4? Was that a bonus point? Or was it count?
Yeah, we'll count that as a bonus.
And
Yeah.
they might have felt anger at Jesus.
It might have been angry. In fact, you kind of get that maybe a little bit from Mary's question, right? How many of your parents, well, let me ask you this, those of you that were left behind someplace, how many of you was it your fault that you were lost?
Oh, shit.
Okay, I could have predicted that. So the rest of you, it was your parents' fault that you got left behind. They thought you were with them or whatever. All right. How many of them were angry with you when they found you? Yeah. You're okay, but it wasn't your fault.
No, they just kind of wandered off.
They wandered off. That's what my wife always says about me when we're shopping. She accuses me of wandering off. No, I don't think it's that way. Anyway, anybody else? So they weren't angry with you because it wasn't your fault. But was it Jesus' fault that he was behind in Jerusalem? Yeah, because he was supposed to be with they had the whole family, all the people from Nazareth, traveling together. It's this big entourage, and Jesus, Jesus, we're leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning. Make sure you're with us. Okay, and he wasn't there. So you can understand why Mary would have been a little bit ticked at him, right? So what else did you say about? Anybody else have additional ideas about how they would have felt, how they would have responded? Brenna?
He might have been confused because they thought he was they were told he was God, so they might have confused it for not being perfect.
Oh, okay, because he's always been perfect before this. By the way, that's something we didn't talk about in his youth when he's growing up. How would you like to have been one of Jesus's brothers or sisters? Why?
Standard to live up to.
Yeah, standard, and he's the oldest, so constantly hearing, "Why can't you be more like Jesus?" Right? Can you imagine that? Right? Or and of course the other kids are always saying, "Jesus never does anything wrong." Whenever mom asks who took the cookies, it's never Jesus. Right? Who didn't pick up their clothes? Well, it wasn't Jesus. We know that. Any of you have older siblings you have to live up to?
Kind of, technically.
Technically? What do you mean technically?
They're a minute older.
A minute older?
Well, in 2 minutes.
So who's the oldest of the three?
Sam.
All right, Sam, do you feel like you set the standard for
No.
the others?
Pretty high standard.
Sam.
How many of you have an older sibling that you felt compared to? Okay, is that tough? How many of you have an older sibling that you're glad you're compared to because they didn't do as well? Sam. How many of you are the oldest sibling in the family? All right, of you, how many of you feel like you got to set a standard, or you got to set an example? Any of you? A couple of you? Okay. All right, so how do we get off into that? Let's see. Oh, we're looking at Jesus in the temple. Okay. Now you can imagine the siblings the whole time they're looking for Jesus. Oh, Jesus is lost, huh? Yeah, Jesus did something wrong, I guess, huh? It's about time. But so they're looking for him for all these days, 3 to 5 days. They're looking for him. Number 127. Why had Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem? In essence, what was he doing? What was Jesus doing in Jerusalem? Noel?
He was speaking with the teachers in the temple.
Yeah. So he was talking with them, asking them questions, interacting with them, discussing stuff in the temple. Any question about your answer? Okay, number 128. What was the reaction of the teachers in the temple? What was their reaction? Griff?
They were amazed at what he was saying.
Yeah, they were amazed at his understanding, at the answers he was giving. Now, have any of your teachers ever been amazed at you? In a good way? I'm sure that there have been times when each one of you has been amazing in your own way. But Jesus was, as a young man of 12, he was evidencing an understanding of the scriptures that they were just astounded. All right, any question about your answer there? All right, so 129. They finally find him. And when they get to Jerusalem, they don't even know where to look. They finally go to the temple. I'm not sure what even draws them there, but they find him there, and Mary kind of reprimands him for being there, for causing him so much trouble looking for him. And what reason did Jesus give for staying behind? Amelia?
That he was like, yeah, it said, like, didn't you know I would be in my father's, like, in the father's house?
Yeah, I must be in my Father's house. What's he saying? Or what does this show us? Let's put it that way. What does this show us, Jordan?
He's realizing he has a special like, connection with God the Father.
Yeah. He's realizing, if he hasn't before, and we don't know at what point as a human being he realized this, but he understands that he is the Son of God. And so he's in his Father's house, doing what he enjoys doing. Any question about your answer there? That should have been pretty simple. All right, so we've gotten through paragraph 18. We will continue tomorrow and cover paragraph 19. And then on Thursday, we're going to have a quiz over everything we've covered so far. All right, so if you haven't completed 19, you've got time to do that for tomorrow. Any questions? Brenna?
With the quiz, will it just be like questions like